Well, I have a lot of questions. I'm sure you got the outline sent to you.
Yeah,
One thing I would like to add, I guess, or hear a little bit more about, now that you mentioned it, was the challenges that COVID did present to you.
yeah,
And that it did change a lot of people's manufacturing processes, of course.
right. Well, I mean, I don't want to ruin the suspense for when you actually ask me the question. But my bottler actually stopped bottling water entirely, and they now make hand sanitizer.
No kidding.
Yeah. Well, I'm John Winslow. I'm the founder of One for One Water, and I this is my first big entry into being an entrepreneur. I mean, when I was a kid, I was 12 years old and had a lawn mowing business, and so I've always had a little bit of that entrepreneurial spirit. But this is so much bigger than me, and so far beyond anything that, if you asked me 5 years ago if I would be launching a national brand bottled water business, I would have said absolutely not. There's no way I would ever do that. So this is really my first big, entry into being an entrepreneur on this kind of scale. I was a firefighter for almost 20 years in Naples, Florida, and I loved it. I was a firefighter EMT. I was a driver engineer, and I was also an alternate lieutenant. And I see the guys that I used to work with, and they're like, "Do you miss it?" I'm like, "I miss it every day." It was I had every little boy's and a lot of little girls' dream job. I got paid to drive a fire truck. I mean, it was one of those things where I would get up in the morning and say, "I get to go to work today." I mean, I never woke up in the morning and said, "I have to go to work today." It was just that kind of environment. And it was a great department that I worked for. So at the fire department, you work 24 hours on, and then you have 48 hours off. So you work every third day for 24 hours. And so I always did something on my days off. My trade is air conditioning. And here in Southwest Florida, that's a great trade to have. And that's probably where the bulk of my business experience comes from. In that industry, I've been everything from an apprentice when I was young to I've been operations manager for a couple of fairly large companies in the area. So when I started to get into leadership roles in the air conditioning industry, that was when I started to realize that the things that I'd learned in the fire department were actually really, really powerful tools in the business world. The fire department's all about organizational structure and process and procedure. And the first company that I went into when I left the fire department had none of those things. And I walked in and rebuilt an entire department in 3 weeks. And then I was the manager of that department when I walked in the door. And then they promoted me to operations manager for the whole company. And I started doing that with the individual departments, just putting processes in place, putting procedures in place, and empowering the people that work there, showing them what the expectation was, training them how to reach that expectation. And it really changed the dynamic a lot for everybody that I worked with in that company. So that's who I was before I had this crazy idea for One for One Water.
That's so awesome. And I always, through these stories, the more and more I hear, it always sounds like everyone's at the right place at the right time, but your path really is, you got to give lifetime to give you the experience. You got to learn the lessons. And then when you're ready, basically the next journey and door is open for you to jump on board through another opportunity. So it sounds really refreshing again to hear, like you were always kind of being fed these tools for success, not knowing that it would lead you to, of course, creating something as big as this. But now you feel empowered enough and ready to take on, over, I guess, in a way.
Well, one thing, a piece of that story that I want to share, especially because right now, with everything that's going on with COVID-19, there are a lot of people that are out of work. Their careers might not even exist anymore right now just because of everything that's going on. So I left the fire department, a 20-year career that I loved, because I had this opportunity at this air conditioning company. And I went in and I was very successful in that company, accomplished every one of the goals that I had when I walked in the door. And I basically did that in the first 3 weeks. And then 90 days after I left the fire department, I was laid off from that job, along with about 100 other people. So I had left a secure career that I loved, that I'd been in for almost 20 years, and stepped out and immediately got my feet kicked out from under me. And that's an important part to mention, because everything that we want is on the other side of a storm or a desert, or whatever analogy you want to put it in. Every good thing that we reach for, every big goal that we have, is going to require hard work, and it's going to require growth, personal and mental growth, and it's going to involve some pain and some difficulty to get there. And that's a really important piece to mention, because if you don't expect that, or if you don't think, if I left that out of my story, somebody might think that doing something this big is easy.
Sure.
And you should know that it's difficult before you walk into it, because if you get blindsided, it can cause you to lose your motivation. Mm-hmm. But when you see something, like when I looked at One for One Water, I realized it was so much bigger than me and had so much potential that I had to do it, even though it was so far outside my comfort zone. And I knew that I was going to have, personal and mental growth, and a lot to learn. And there have been some struggles in it, and knowing my why, knowing why I decided to step out so far, is the thing that gets me through when I have one of those days. So I wanted to share that, because that it kind of came off rosy, like I left the fire department and I just glided into this role, and it wasn't like that at all. It was a couple of years of real struggle trying to find my place and figure out what exactly I was supposed to be doing.
So were you doing more inner work? I know you identify as Christian, and mm-hmm. Was it more of a guided thing that you were called to do? I know you have some experience with doing mission trips. Was that part of the figuring out and the why?
The way that One for One Water started was I've loved the compassionate entrepreneur, the socially responsible entrepreneur concept since I first heard about it. And I've literally been looking for my version of that. I've been looking for something that I could do. And I've had a couple of ideas. Like I wanted to build a factory in Haiti to make clothing, and then have a clothing line that created jobs. And when I did the numbers on it, it just didn't work. So I mean, I looked at several different things like that and tried to. I've always wanted to do something like this. And I was literally driving down the road one day, drinking a bottle of water, and I thought, if Tom's can give away a pair of shoes for every pair they sell, if Warby Parker can give away a pair of glasses, if Bombas can give away a pair of socks, why can't we do it with water? And then I immediately thought, well, if it was a great idea, somebody else would have done it already. And I tried to put it out of my head, and it literally kept me awake at night. Yeah. So I started making calls. I called a bottler. I called some retailers. I started building out some spreadsheets to see what pricing and cost and freight and everything was going to look like to make it happen. And I did all of that. And I really was confident that I was going to prove to myself that this was another bad idea, and then I'd be able to get some sleep. And it turns out that the numbers worked, and society is really ready for this kind of thing right now. I mean, people are looking for mission-driven businesses that they can connect with. Part of that process was looking at part of seeing if the numbers worked was seeing, what it would cost to fund a well in South America or Africa, and how many people would that well take care of? How many liters of water a day would those wells produce? And would those numbers all work so that we could keep our promise of providing a liter for every liter that we sell? When I started doing that, and I realized how massive the bottled water market is in the United States, in 2021, bottled water in the United States alone is going to be 25 billion in annual sales.
With a B, huh?
With a B, 25 billion. So when I sat with the branding and marketing team, they said, what's your big, hairy, audacious goal? What would be a huge win? And I'd never thought about it this way before at all. But I was like, they were like, what's your goal? And I said, 55 million in annual revenue, which is 0.25% of that $25 billion market. Because at 55 million in annual revenue, we'll be funding a new well every day. That each one of these wells provides water for somewhere around 500 to 1,000 people. We launched on November 1st and funded a well in Bihanga, Uganda, and that well provides clean water for 545 people today. So that was when I looked at it and I was like, man, this really could have an impact on the global water crisis. This really could be a powerful vehicle for people to be able to connect with us and actually do something. I thought I knew about the global water crisis before. Like, you see its effects on TV, people talk about it on the news or on documentaries or whatever. But I didn't realize it's not just about the health issues. It's not just about the waterborne illness. It's also completely sociological. Like, if there's a village and they don't have a well, usually it's the mother and the daughters that gather the water, and they'll spend 6 hours a day traveling to get water and bringing it home. And it's still not safe to drink. It's still not clean water most of the time. There's all kinds of dangers on the road. There's animal and human predators on those roads, and their entire day is spent gathering that water. So now that there's a well in that community, now that daughter can go to school. The mother can garden, she can sew, she can do something, she can work now, because it takes them 20 minutes a day to get water instead of 6 hours. There are literally billions of hours of lost manpower every year because of that time spent gathering that water. So the sons who go to work with their fathers, now they can go to school. That well changes the entire dynamic of the community. And the nonprofits that we work with do something that I think is really cool. They don't give the people the well. They go into a community and they bring together the elders in the community and they say, it really looks like you guys could use a well. And the elders say, yeah, we do, but we couldn't afford one. And they say, okay, we're going to give you a microloan for this well. And you are going to charge a small fee for everybody that uses the well. And that's how you're going to pay us back. And in doing that, it changes the dynamic, because if you go in and you provide something for a community that the elders and the leaders in that community couldn't provide, you've effectively pushed them deeper into their poverty. You've pushed them down and elevated yourself, not intentionally. I mean, there's so much good that's been done, and just this slight twist on it changes the dynamic of it. Because when you come in and you say, we'll give you a microloan for a well, now you've just empowered them to lift themselves up out of poverty. And it's so small of a difference, but it's absolutely huge in what it does for those people. And these organizations, they take that money that's coming back in from the payments on the well, and they go back to the leaders and they say, it kind of looks like now that there's a well in the community, you could really use a school. And they say, yeah. So it's just really, really cool, the thought that goes into it, and and the things that have been learned just in the last 20 years about about the way to care for people and to care for them in the best way that doesn't just meet their physical needs but actually empowers them at the same time. It's really cool. And I knew little to none of this a year and a half ago when I started this whole journey.
It's unique. So with your understanding of the water crisis, how little, I guess, did you have the understanding of? Just thought we didn't have enough for the world too, or did you just understand it as there wasn't access to clean water for everyone?
Right. Well, that's what I mean is I knew that there were, it's almost 1 billion people on the planet today that don't have access to clean water. I didn't realize that number. I knew it was bad. I knew it was a lot. But what I mean is I knew, clean water is just a basic life necessity. But what I didn't know was all of the secondary impacts that well has in the community, how that changes the entire community. I read a quote, I want to say it was from it was a UN official, United Nations official. And he said that clean water and sanitation were the keys to unlocking the chains of poverty in the third world. And I thought, man, that's lofty. I mean, and then the more that I learned about it, the more I realized that's actually entirely true. With that well in that community, the people in that community now they're healthier, now they're stronger, now they can work, now they have the time to work, now they can be educated, they have the time to be educated. I didn't know anything about all of those things. I didn't know about the dangers to the women when they were traveling to the wells. I just didn't know about those things. And most of the people that I talk to today kind of have the same, it's called an awareness level. Like you're aware that there's a problem, but you don't know how big and how deep the problem goes. And I think most people today have an awareness level of the global water crisis. And then, obviously you learn a little bit more about it and you start to see all of the things that are connected to it. So that's a big part of what I learned.
And, back to the whole awareness level itself, like my awareness is we have these infrastructures that we've been essentially blessed with the design to have, man-made systems that, they work pretty effectively and efficiently to our knowledge, but how, I guess, sustainable is it in the sense of really repurposing water that has not been so polluted or, runoff? Like you can't just be drinking street runoff water, of course, but, there's canals and dredges, things that have been created and, again, intentionally designed to manage our resource of water here in the U.S. specifically. But to understand how a smaller village or country in, another continent, we just don't see those things or haven't experienced them firsthand. So, same deal. I understand that it does take a few hours or even a lot of time of the day to just harvest the water and to get it back. That's physically exhausting to even try to imagine how that would, exert that much energy. But beyond that, what you're saying, like to spend 6 hours of a day, to basically spend that 5 hours maybe educating themselves, teaching, or just being part of their family and village that they were so far from before. And really refreshing to hear that that's how a small initiative can affect another grand scale of things.
Yeah. The thing is, and I think because of the scale of the global water crisis, because it's so many people, it's 1 billion people, I think that's the reason that we don't have a better awareness of it. And what I mean by that is, like, if I don't know, if you were walking down the street and you saw a child in danger, you would rush and help that child. If you alone were walking down the street and you saw 500 children in danger, you would still start to help, but it would be overwhelming. And if you were walking down the street and you saw 1 billion children, you would feel totally powerless to have any kind of impact on that. And I think that's I think that's part of it. I think because it's so huge and so terrible, I think there's something in human nature that when you see something that's that overwhelming and you're powerless to do anything about it, you kind of look away. You know, you can't look at it because it's so terrible, and you feel like there's nothing that you can do about it. And that's what One for One Water is. We've created a way for compassionate people to have an impact on the global water crisis every day. And that's what One for One Water is all about. It's about empowering those people who want to make the world a little bit better of a place, giving them just one more tool in their toolbox that they can use to do that. So
Yeah, that's awesome. And, I remember as a kid, commercials, there was certain organizations that were raising funds for,
mhm.
I think it was more feeding poverty, but you feel bad. You're just like sitting there eating a bag of chips or drinking water, soda, whatever it might be. And then, I guess that human compassion gene, it's triggered and you don't want to donate. But again, a lot of people probably just flip the channel. So was that really effective in moving that forward?
Right.
Debatable, but to have a more, I guess, tangible product, which I'm very happy to share that I was able to find it, a tangible product that you can, again, read, go to a website, have a connection face-to-face with the owner, and just understand more of the intentional business side, I guess, of it. It's not to selfishly make you a multimillionaire or the next person. It's a collective movement and a global shift in how we can all help each other.
Right. There's a lot of secondary things that as we grow that we'll be able to do. But the nonprofits that we work with are just really amazing. We work with Village Works, and what they do is they have what's called a bucket filter. And you take a 5-gallon bucket, you drill a hole in the bottom of it, you screw this filter into it. And that filter will provide clean water for a family of 4 for 10 years. And they cost $30. Yeah. So in small communities or a community where it's just geographically impossible to get a well drilling rig, Village Works goes into those communities and they provide these bucket filters. So they're our solution for smaller communities. Living Water International is a nonprofit based out of Texas, and they've been funding wells since the 90s. They've been around forever. They've got a really great success rate with their wells continuing to stay functional. Their wells are really, really simple, really basic. They're very difficult to break and very easy to fix. They have like 2 moving parts in them. So they've got a great success rate for keeping those wells functioning 20 years after they've been installed. And just like Bihanga, the wells that they do typically provide clean water for 500 to 1,000 people. And then Waterboys is a group that's made up of NFL players, and they fund big wells. Their wells will provide 10,000 gallons of water a day. And so therefore, basically small towns. I mean, they can provide a lot of clean water for a lot of people with those wells. And they're our solution to bigger communities and that type of thing. So I was really intentional about, I wanted an answer for each of these groups. One of our goals as we scale, you mentioned earlier that, even here in the United States, there are places that don't have clean drinking water. They have contaminated water. As we scale, the best solution that I've seen so far for the problems here in the United States is I'd like to hire a grant writer. I'd like to have somebody in our office, and their entire role is to find these communities that need clean water and write state and federal grants and get funding. And then we can help, if there's more funding that needs to be provided, we can help fund those projects. So that's kind of one of our long-term goals as we scale and grow over the next couple of years is to add that piece, because I love being able to do this great work to people who, for people who desperately need it, that don't have water to survive at all. But it's always been really important to me to take care of our own and help people here at home that don't have that access. So there are people who have contaminated wells right here in the United States. There are cities that have water that should not be consumed by humans. So that's another piece of what we hope to do.
That's awesome. So as of now, it is pretty focused on just developing the wells.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what's really cool is we're funding the wells, but the nonprofits that we work with have a presence in those communities. They don't just go in and drill a well and then walk away from those communities. They're really intentional um, about raising up leaders within those communities themselves. Um, you asked me earlier if I'd been on mission trips, and I think I shared with you in June of last year, I was in Jeremy, Haiti, with a group, and we were doing medical mission trips. It was a medical clinic that we were there for. We did 5 days of medical clinics and treated like 350 people in those 5 days. And there were several people that we saw in those 5 days that if that group had not been there, those people would not be alive today. There were people that came in. One of them was an infant with really severe pneumonia that we flew out to Port-au-Prince the next day. That organization is called Haiti Bible Mission, and they have this model. They don't like Mark Stockland is the founder of that, and they never bring in an American and put them like in front of the Haitian church to teach. They might bring a group of Haitian pastors together, and that American pastor might have a class and teach them as leaders. But everything about these nonprofits that we work with is about lifting up leaders within those communities, not going in and being the leader of that community, but going in and lifting them up and equipping and empowering the people that are already there. That's a really important piece of it. You know, the well is great, but if there's no ability to do maintenance, if nobody's been trained to do maintenance on the well, then it's going to stop working. And, you know, if there's nobody there to teach, then now they just have 6 hours of idle time. You know, if there's no school, if there's no teacher. So the groups that we work with are very intentional about the presence in that community after the well. And that's really important.
Yeah, because it's more than just, again, kind of jumping into a community saying, hey, we see that you're struggling. This is what you need. We'll give it to you. 6 months later, they're left with nothing, basically, again, and kind of back to square one in a sense. And I guess I didn't know that side of the work that the nonprofits are doing itself, not just going in again and saying, yeah, this is what we're doing, and then leaving, but really giving them that, again, the tools for success, like,
Right.
but not in a disempowering way.
Right.
Like, I guess telling them like, oh, you guys got problems, good luck, we'll be over here when you need us, type of thing.
Right.
No,
Well,
they're very present and grounded with supporting the growth and sustainability of that community.
right. And in some communities, they will bring in like a teacher from the outside, you know, somebody that wants to do mission work and wants to be a teacher. That does happen. But most of the time, their goal there is to train up other teachers within the community. So that's, um, like you said, it's the difference between providing for them or equipping them. It's really it's subtle in the way that it's done, but it's so powerful. You know, the difference between those two.
Earlier you mentioned, the real motivation to starting this was kind of saying that, if more people were doing it, or if anybody was doing it, it would have been done, type of thing. But through your research, you never did discover that anybody else was doing like a similar lines of work with the water, or you have?
I actually, the only thing that I really know of is Starbucks has Ethos,
Okay.
which is their water that they sell in the store, and they provide. I think it's 5 cents from every bottle that they sell goes to clean water projects in coffee growing regions, which is very cool. And a lot of companies do giving. I mean, Target gives back 5% to every community the store that it has a store. So a lot of corporations have giving as part of their business model. It's just a smart way to do business. But as far as anybody that actually just did this, there's no one else out there that I know of that's doing it. Something really, really interesting happened to me right before we launched. We originally it was going to be called Give Beverages instead of One for One Water. We kind of rebranded and said, no, One for One communicates who we are and what we do. Rebranded and came up with the logo that you see now, which actually is a lot easier to see it on the hat
Got
than
it.
it is on the logo. But so we rebranded and we were putting stuff out on social media, and a guy contacted me on Facebook and he said, "Hey, I love what you're doing, but we need to talk about the fact that you're using my logo." And we're 2 weeks from launch. I have pallets of water with the logo on it. And I was like, what? So I contacted the guy, and it, it was really funny because it turned out that we had a couple of mutual friends. And when we were designing the logo, we had 4 different versions of it, and we beta tested those with about 5,000 people. So the mutual friends of this guy were some of the people that had received the email with the beta testing images in it. And they had voted for the logo that we currently have. So I reached out to him, and I sent him that beta testing email, and then we talked and realized we had a couple of friends in common. And he was like, "Man, it's so crazy because in 2010, this guy went to Haiti on a church mission trip and saw that there was a large lack of clean water in Haiti. And he came back and decided to do 1-for-1 water and fund wells in Haiti. And I had never met him. I'd never heard of him before. And he ran the business for about a year, and it didn't get traction, and he just shut it down. Like I said, when I first got that message from him, I was sick to my stomach. I'm like, what's happening here? I'm going to have to rebrand and everything else. And then when he and I talked, and he saw that we hadn't just stolen his logo, because they're very similar. The font is different, but it's very, very similar. So anyhow, after he and I talked, and he realized that we had come up with that logo, I mean, if you put, I don't know, 30 people in a room and gave them a pencil and paper and said, design a logo for 1-for-1, a couple of them would come up with what we have or something very similar. But so anyhow, after he and I talked, and he told me, his story of how he had the idea when he was in Haiti, and then he came back, and then he wound up, getting too busy with other business projects, and so he shut it down after a year. I had a conversation with a couple of my investors, and they said, how do you feel about that? That somebody tried it already and they failed, or gave it up or whatever. And I thought about it, and I was like, it's really crazy, the fact that the logo was so similar and the mission was so similar. And I almost feel like this guy decided that he didn't want to pursue it anymore, and he put it on a shelf. God wasn't done with it yet. He was just waiting for the right person to come along and say, okay, I want you to pick this up, and I want you to move forward with it. And like I said, it was really funny because I sent the guy all the different versions of the logo that we had drafted and gone back and forth and everything. And he's an entrepreneur. He's got a new business that he just launched. So he and I have stayed in contact. But it was really, really funny. It's kind of surreal that this wasn't really my idea, and I'm not entirely sure it was his. I think this was an idea that it's time for this, and almost 10 years later, I just come up with the same concept and the same name, and a very similar logo. It was surreal. So.
Yeah, that is pretty. And you don't make those things up, right? It's very hard.
Oh my gosh, it was terrifying.
I can imagine that gut feeling, though.
I had hats, I had T-shirts, I had, a vehicle that was wrapped with the logo on it.
Well, at this point, again, you had really committed and invested that next tier of, I'm ready, we're doing it. And
we were a couple of weeks from launch, and so it was a little bit stressful until, we talked, and then we wrote up an agreement, really simple agreement, and he gave me the rights to the logo and to a couple of domain names and that kind of thing. So it worked out, but it was, like I said, when I talked to them, they were kind of concerned. They were like, well, do you think you maybe ever saw this somewhere? And this guy was in the Atlanta area, and he never got outside the Atlanta area. So it wasn't like it was a national brand. It was a flash and then it went away. He was kind of in a local at the time.
Like you said, you did the research, never once came across this, but I guess it was really hidden in that shelf of
Mm-hmm.
ready to be picked up, but in the back of the library and the bottom shelf. And
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like it's like a library. If there are books in that library that there's only a handful of people that are going to gravitate toward that specific book. And I think that's a lot of how life is. I hear a lot of people that are entrepreneurs, and to me, it's almost like they're shaming anybody that's not an entrepreneur. They're like, you've got to follow your dream. You've got to reach out and be bigger than you. And it gets to a point where it's almost shaming. If you've got a good job and you love your job and you're happy there, there's nothing wrong with that. If you have something in your heart or in your mind that you feel like you want to do something more, there's definitely nothing wrong with that. But I see so much. I'm involved with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I've got some friends that are educators and motivational speakers and that kind of thing. And sometimes that group of people, it like I said, it's almost like they're shaming you if you don't have some aspiration, or they want to sit down with you and help you figure out what it should be. I can coach you and help you figure out what your interests are or whatever. And I think there are plenty of people that have great jobs and they provide for their family and they're happy, and leave them alone. There's nothing wrong with that.
yeah, if it's working for them, let it be.
Exactly. I've yet to meet anybody that when I tell them, what I do, that they've said, "Oh, I've always wanted to do that."
But even you wouldn't, I guess 5 years ago, you wouldn't have said you wanted to do it, but you also didn't understand your capability or even power to maybe create something like this.
Right. Well, like I said, as I was building it and I started to realize the impact that we could have, I built out a business plan. I built out projections and spreadsheets, and I took them to the two most skeptical businessmen that I knew. They were where I'm like, if anybody can poke a hole in this, it's these guys. So I took my business plan and I went and I sat with a friend of mine at lunch and slide the plan across the table. And I told him that I was going to do this, and I handed him a red pen, and he starts flipping through and asking me questions based on the information in the business plan. And he hammered me for an hour and a half. This guy's a sharp, successful businessman. He knows about margins, he knows about cost of goods, he knows about all of these things. And so he was a perfect resource for me. But again, a very high level skeptic. So we sit there for an hour and a half and he just beats me up. And I had, most of the time it was in the business plan, the statistics, the data, the information to answer every question that he had for an hour and a half. And he was like exhausted at the end of it. I kind of was too, actually. And he never made a red mark in the business plan. So he puts the pen back on it. He slides it back across the table to me. And I said, so tell me why it won't work. Tell me what I'm missing. Am I too motivated by the passion for it, or does the business model work? Show me the flaw in it. And he kind of sat back and he sat there for a minute. And then he said, what happens when you drill all these wells and nobody else needs wells anymore? And I was like, so just to be clear, the only downside you can see to my business is that it could potentially end the global water crisis. And nobody else will need wells anymore. And then he realized what he had just said, and we both started laughing about it. And I told him, I'm like, Peter, if that happens, I will board up the windows and doors on the main office, and I will collect my Nobel Prize on the way out of town, and I will just retire and feel like I've done something meaningful. So, but the thing is, like, I I'm so I'm so conscious of trying to not over project what we can do. Um, it, in that $25 billion bottled water industry, two major players have 10% each. Well, it's like 9.6% each of that market. So just for easy math, 10% of 25 billion. So two major players are doing over 2 billion annually in bottled water.
Okay.
Yeah. Coke and Pepsi both have their own bottled water brands, and both of those brands they account for like 9.5% of the bottled water sales. And then there are other players that get um, probably between like 1 and 3% is most of the other brands that you see on the shelf in the grocery store. And then there are a ton of brands that get less than 1% of that market. The goals that I have for One Water are based on our giving. When we get to 55 million in annual revenue, that's 1/4 of 1% of that marketplace, and we'll be able to fund a new well every day. That's a win for me. That's when I'll feel like we've really started to gain momentum and become what we were born to be. We've got a great product. I was really intentional about, I wanted to make sure that the product had legs to stand on. I didn't want it to be a pity buy. I didn't want it to be, it doesn't taste great, but I love what they do. So the water that we currently have was voted one of the top best tasting spring waters in the world. There's actually an annual water tasting competition called the Berkeley Springs Water Tasting, and they taste all of these different waters, and the water that we have was ranked in the top 5 in the entire world. Something that we haven't talked about is that the bottles, like that bottle that you have there, is both recyclable and biodegradable. I looked at every manner of packaging that I could find, and I looked at paper, I looked at aluminum, I looked at glass, and this by far has the best carbon footprint and the best end source solution. So if you live in a community where they have recycling and throw it in a recycle bin, it's called a biopolymer. It's a plant-based plastic. So if it goes into a recycle bin, it will recycle. But if it winds up in a landfill, it will biodegrade in 4 years. And a standard plastic bottle takes 450 years. I mean, like I said, I obsessed over the packaging because I wanted to just deliver the best that we possibly could. And then if you go into a grocery store, convenience store, coffee shop, and buy a bottle of our water, it's going to be competitively priced with any other premium brand of water that's on that shelf. We're going to be right in the middle of the price of any of those other major national brands. So we've got a really great product, we've got really great packaging, and we're competitively priced. And then we have the mission on top of that. I wanted it to have more than one leg to stand on. I wanted it to be a really great product with really great packaging and fair pricing. And that was what I was looking at. Those were the calls I was making. Those were the spreadsheets I was building, was seeing if we could do it in a way that it would really be of value to consumers.
That's interesting. So when I did first pick it up, I was like, wait, how is this sustainable? So I'm happy you shared that biopolymer thing. That's new to me. Is it basically more plant-based plastic than?
What it is, it's actually just an additive that they add to, so that's the bio is an additive to a standard polymer bottle. In the bottling facility, this is called a preform, and this is what the bottles look like before they're blown into the mold like this. If anybody else has a bottled water product and they want to convert to these, it adds about 2 cents to every bottle. It's really not that big of a cost to convert over. And my bottler actually converted their entire production facility over to these bottles once I came on board with them. They did all the research and they confirmed everything that that the manufacturer told them and everything, and they converted their entire production over to these bottles. So I think it's kind of cool because we were building one-for-one water to have an impact on people that needed water, and we're having other impacts because we're having impacts on the packaging that's available here in the United States. I looked at the cardboard, I looked at the paper packaging, and it has a terrible carbon footprint. You know, the first step in making those is cutting down a bunch of trees. So then you haul those trees to a production facility, you process it into raw paper, they haul the raw paper to a different facility that converts it into the carton containers, then they haul the carton containers to a bottling facility where they fill them with water. And so there's all of this fuel being burned to transport those around because of the process that's involved in making them. And then they don't biodegrade well in landfills. Glass is so heavy that the carbon footprint is horrible. You got to, you know, it's made in these furnaces that have to be incredibly hot. And aluminum, people are like, well, aluminum's a mineral. It belongs in the earth if it goes into a landfill. Aluminum belongs 1,200 feet below the surface of the earth. That's why they have to mine it. And when aluminum goes into a landfill, and it can get into the surface water, and aluminum in that surface water is incredibly unsafe. So I was really, really diligent in trying to find the best solution for the packaging. So, and I'm really happy with them. I mean, it wound up working out really well that we've got this great bottler now. And the water's also, it's naturally alkaline. The pH is 8.3, and it's consistent 8.3. So
when discovering, or I guess doing more research as to what spring or how you wanted to source the water, was that another pretty rigorous process in finding, you know, what would still be sustainable but produce very high quality water?
What happened initially, I had a bottler in Florida, and I wasn't really comfortable. I mean, there are a lot of people that bottle water here in Florida, and there are a lot of big corporations that take that water, and there's no real taxing on it or anything like that here in Florida. And people are starting to say that it's impacting natural springs and that type of thing, like the water is being removed at too rapid of a rate. So that was a concern for me, and I was trying to find a solution for that. I was looking for another bottler when COVID-19 happened. And what wound up happening is the bottler that I was using here in North Florida stopped producing bottled water and started producing hand sanitizer. And so I desperately then started contacting bottlers. And over a 3-week period, I spoke to over 100 bottlers. And to find a bottler that had a natural spring water that was naturally alkaline, could do the 1 liter and the half-liter sizes of the bottles, and was willing to switch over to the biodegradable bottles. There are like 12 different versions of this cap size in the bottling industry. So I'd call somebody and they'd be like, we have a 27 millimeter cap. We can't run your production. And it was just all of these boxes that had to be checked. So I finally found a company in Tennessee, and it's a smaller bottler, and they switched their entire production facility over to the biodegradable bottles because they loved them so much. They have an artesian spring, and the difference in that and what goes on here in Florida is in Tennessee and North Carolina, you can only harvest water that comes to the surface on its own. You can't drill a well and pull water out of the earth. If it bubbles up out of the water on its own, then it's considered a spring, and you can pull that water off the surface. And that's how they determined that they were going to protect their natural aquifer from being depleted. So the bottler that I found in Tennessee has an artesian spring on their property, and that's how they harvest the water, is the water comes to the surface on its own power because that water is just bubbling up out of the ground on its own. What wound up happening is my old bottler doesn't produce water anymore. And I found this new bottler that has what I consider to be a better product. And this is the product that actually was in the top 5 in the world's best tasting spring water. So it's a great tasting product. It's naturally alkaline, and I feel better about the way that it's harvested. I grew up here in Florida, And I've seen what has happened to the freshwater availability here. We see what happens every time we have, heavy rains and the Lake Okeechobee starts to get overfilled. I was brought up that we were supposed to take care of the planet. So these pieces were all really important to me, the environmental impact of the packaging and the environmental impact of harvesting the water. It wound up being a blessing in disguise when that bottler stopped making product for me, because now I found what is a better product, and it's more centrally located, so it's better for shipping, it's better for freight, and it gives us the ability to get product to the Amazon warehouse that we deal with very quickly. So it's wound up being much better than what we had before. So it was 7 weeks of just I, a bottled water guy that doesn't have any bottled water isn't really much of a businessman. So it was a stressful period of time. There've been several things like that have happened through this process, and that's just business. Those things happen, but I really feel like what we're doing is so much bigger than me. I really feel like just everything is working together to make sure that we're successful. It's not going to be easy, but I have so much confidence in the success of this business, and not because of me. Um, I've met the right people at the right time, sometimes when I didn't even know that I needed those people. At the right time, the right person comes along, and it's just the way it works.
You found that more people, I guess your friends and maybe closer family members, have they been like really inspired by the work that you're doing? And I mean, nonetheless, it's a really great legacy that you're leaving for future generations to continue to thrive from, of course, but also you're kind of setting a new level of leadership for entrepreneurs and, again, business models that can thrive in this type of business, rather than just striving to make, the end profit goal.
The reaction for this business is like nothing I've ever seen. Um, People just connect with what we do immediately. Like I walk into a coffee shop and hand them a bottle of water and say, hey, this is who we are and this is what we do. Um, would you be interested in having this here? And it's the response is just amazing. People, before we even start talking about pricing and what it's going to cost them and what they can sell it for, they're like, we'll never sell anything else. This is amazing. We love what you do. We will pull every other brand off the shelf. And I've had a couple of retailers that have kind of gone to war for me, because some of the other beverage companies they want exclusivity, and that's fine. But I've had a couple of them. I've had a couple of places that I went into and I showed them the product, and they were like, "Absolutely, we'll carry it." And then the distributor for that other company came in, and they were like, you can't sell one for one water and have our product on the shelf." And those retailers have said, "Okay, take your product and get it out of my store."
Wow.
And they've backed down, but that's how people connect with this. So in most businesses, you you do your customer engagement stuff, and then you go back and you do whatever piece of that business that it is that motivates you and gets you energized again, so that you have the energy and the enthusiasm to go back out and do customer service again or do sales again. Mm-hmm. This business is completely the opposite. Like, I start working in the morning and I do invoices and I do, all the different things that I have to do that are like the business piece of it, that are my least favorite piece of the business. And then I will go out and visit retailers that carry the product and just pop in to see how they're doing, see if they need anything. Walk in wearing one of the shirts and people cheer. They're like, "Hey, it's the water guy." Like, people just love what we do. And I think it's that thing. I think it's because we've come up with a way for them to do something about it. It's a great product, and people tell me that all the time. But I think the thing is that it's something I can do. And that's the thing, is that, we talked earlier about when something is an overwhelming problem and you kind of feel you just have to kind of look away from it. That's not that, you're a bad person because you are overwhelmed by something that you feel like you can't do anything about. So I want to make sure we point that out, because there are things in this world that we feel powerless to do anything about, and that's human nature. It's just a piece of who we are. But people connect with it's not what we do. People are like, I love what you do, and I'm like, we provide the tools. You're the ones that are doing it. You're the ones that are buying the water. You're the ones that are telling people about it. And it's just really cool to be somewhere and see somebody that's drinking 1-for-1 water, or see somebody that's got one of the hats or shirts on, and see that people are telling people about what we do because they're passionate about it.
Yeah, that's definitely how, I mean, I was inspired to reach out to you. I think it was 2 years ago now that you handed me the gift beverages card
Yeah,
just so we could stay in contact. And for
right.
whatever reason, I kept that um, in a pile of stuff, really. And it wasn't until I just more things, life continues, started the podcast. I've always kept the name and the information. And then when I was like, wait, this is another perfect opportunity to just hear how someone, I like to say step into their power, but really just said yes to the opportunity and didn't, building resilience and just not giving up on the success of it, or even the vision for it. That's the first real step, is just having the idea and continuing to grow your passion and momentum. But you created that why. You answered that why. It wasn't just for yourself. It's a more from me to we thing. And like you're saying, collectively, you're applauded, I guess, by others, but everyone should really be giving themselves a pat on the back, because
Yeah.
moving forward with, not only just consuming bottled water, obviously that's a huge problem, plastic waste from uh, plastic water bottles themselves, but
Mhm.
you've kind of transitioned into the next level of not only solving a problem, but again, a global crisis, essentially. And that's, it almost gives me chills, because it excites me that much that people are doing stuff like this.
Right.
And I think it goes so unheard of. And you can market and brand yourself all you want, spend money on advertisement, but it's not until, I guess, you create a real relationship with the founder, the creator behind it, that you have a really valuable connection
I
with.
think a lot of people want to do more, but it's not really something that people talk about. So it's not something that you can say, hey, I want to do this business. How can I make it more? How can I make it bigger than just a business? And there are so many things that you can do, like what you're doing with your podcast of connecting people who are working and trying to be their best version of themselves. That's great. I mean, that's an amazing thing. And your platform is really amazing. When you reached out to me, I was like, this is awesome. I was so proud of you. I know that sounds funny, but I'm kind of like, I feel like a big brother to you, kind of. But there's a way that you can take almost any business, and you don't have to be, um, doing millions of dollars in revenue before you can have an impact. There are underserved people in every community that would benefit from an opportunity. So if you've got, I don't care what it is. I don't care what kind of business it is. If it's a lawn business, you know, that you can reach underserved people in your community and provide them with a job opportunity. And that can be your mission, knowing that you've provided an opportunity and provided somebody with training and equipped them and given them, empowered them to lift themselves up. To me, that is a bigger why than I want to have a successful business. Now, there's plenty of people out there that are motivated by I just want to have a successful business, and they want to do year-end giving or whatever, and that's the way they want to do it. That's fine. That's a way to do it. But if you're starting small and you've only got a couple of employees or something like that, or there's always going to be some way that you can benefit somebody that's underserved. You can provide, a discount for military veterans, or a discount for teachers, or for, single parents, or whoever. There's something you can do that you can make compassion part of the DNA of your mission. And it doesn't have to be big. doesn't have to be huge. There are people that would say, you know, there are a billion people that don't have clean water, and you've helped 545 of them. Well, I dare you to say that to those 545 people.
No kidding.
You know, I didn't get to go on this trip. It's really expensive to go on the trip, and I could fund an entire well for what it would have cost for me to go on the trip. So, but one of the leaders from Living Water International was there on that trip, and she was using WhatsApp, and she was sending me pictures and videos from when they were drilling the well, and it was just amazing. I mean, they knew what it meant. You know, they knew that it was bigger than just clean water. They knew, and they were literally dancing in the streets in this little community, and it was just humbling. That's why I don't really feel like this is my idea. I really feel like this is an inspired idea. And when I say that, it's meant to put it into perspective. This was not in my, not in my field, not anything I had any experience doing, and so far outside anything I'd ever done, foundational business principles aside, they're completely out of my wheelhouse and so big that I had to do it. We talked at the beginning a little bit about there's been, personal growth. I mean, I've learned a lot. I've grown a lot in knowledge from the industry and all the different aspects of the retail, the distribution, all of the different pieces of the industry. I've learned a ton about that. I've still got a lot to learn. But when you step outside your comfort zone is when weaknesses in your armor become visible, and you realize, man, I've got to work on that about myself. Last year in August, I went to New York and I pitched Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. And there were 100 people in the room, and they said, not everybody is going to get to pitch in front of the room. So we're going to pick a handful of people. And if you'd like to be one of those people, just check the box that says, I'm willing to pitch in front of the room of 100 people. Well, Kevin Harrington is the original shark. And if you can't stand in front of a room of 100 people and pitch your business confidently, he's not going to respect you as an entrepreneur. That's just how it is. And I knew that, and I didn't want to do it, but I checked the box. And we had this thing that we did in the fire department. Like it happened when I was only a few years into the fire service. I was walking into a structure fire in the middle of the night. I was a senior firefighter, and we had a rookie firefighter that had never been in a fire. He'd done it in fire academy and training, but he'd never been in a real live structure fire. So lieutenant, rookie firefighter, and myself walking up to this house, and I could see that his respirations were really, really high, and I could tell that he was getting caught up in the adrenaline that you get when you walk into a fire. And so I punched him in the shoulder really hard and shocked him, and he turned and he looked at me. Now the bunker gear is thick, so he was protected. But I shocked him out of, I shocked him out of his own head. He was getting into his own head, and I shocked him out of that when I punched him in the shoulder. And he looked at me, and I grabbed him and pulled him up close to me, and I said, "This is what we do." And he said, "Okay, let's do it." And we went in, and he got control of his breathing, slowed his heart rate down, and we put the fire out. So I know there are pieces of this that you feel uncomfortable with sometimes. And standing in front of that room of 100 people and pitching Kevin Harrington and everybody else was the piece that I didn't seek that out at all. But I knew this is the role that I've accepted. And there's going to be a lot more of this kind of public speaking and a lot more educating people and raising their level of awareness about the global water crisis and what we can do. So that's what I did. As I was walking up to that front of that room, I said, this is what you do. You know, you accepted this role. And I was just ice calm. It was the funniest thing. Because I've done a little bit of public speaking. I've taught and that kind of thing as a firefighter. And I was always nervous. And this was probably the most important public speaking I had ever done at that point. And I was just completely calm and walked up and crushed it. Um, so it was a really cool thing, but it was part of that growing and learning piece of it, you know.
So that was your first proposal to, I guess, angel investors in a way. You had, had the idea, but no real funding behind it yet. Is that?
Right. I funded it myself up into probably about August of last year, and we're actually doing round A of funding still. We actually extended it 90 days because of COVID-19 kind of shutting everything down on us. But for the most part, the investors that we have at this point are local investors from the Southwest Florida community. They are personal friends of mine, people that I've met through business through the years and that type of thing primarily. But you know, for the most part, they are business owners in Southwest Florida. And we've raised, our goal is to raise $250,000 for this round A, and we're halfway to that goal at this point. Kevin Harrington, after going back and forth with him for several weeks, said, you know, Kevin Harrington, one of his guys that I have still maintained contact with, one of his guys said, you know, Kevin doesn't invest in pre-revenue businesses. And at that point we were pre-revenue. And I was kind of like, well, that would have been good to know before I flew to New York.
You know.
But it was a great experience. Every time, you know, I've got a couple of other friends that are entrepreneurs that are doing startups, and I tell them, anybody that asks you about the business, pitch to them, do your pitch, because every time you do it, you get a little bit better at it. That's what I tell entrepreneurs, is just any opportunity that you have to pitch, especially in front of a group of people, take that opportunity, even if there might not be anybody in that room. The other thing is you never know who might, you know, make an introduction to you. You know, if you're raising funding, you never know who might have an uncle that they want to put you in touch with or something. And so it's great practice. And like I said, I know, you know, my marketing people want me to do a TED Talk, and I'm not really excited about that, but I'm going to do it, you know.
Good for you. Is that organized in the near future, or that's not really a thing yet?
It'll probably be like third quarter of this year. It's probably,
yeah, once things start really opening and public spaces can have more than 10 people, huh?
Right. Yeah.
Huh. That's awesome. So with the locations here in Southwest Florida, is that essentially where people can find the product, other than online purchasing it?
Mm-hmm. If you go to our website, which is oneforOnewater.com, you can click on the link and you can actually buy through Amazon. And we just got that set up, so I'm really excited about that. If you're here in Southwest Florida, we have sites from Old Naples to Tampa that carry One for One Water. And the thing is, that's about building brand recognition and really kind of starting to develop a market for the product. The next big step in a beverage company is to get distributors to carry your product, so that you instead of doing direct distribution, which is what we're doing now, instead of selling 10 cases at a time, you're selling 10 pallets at a time to the distributor, and then they handle the going out and stocking the shelves at the convenience stores or wherever they are. So COVID-19 hit the brakes on us on a couple of things. We couldn't get product on Amazon because Amazon had shut down a lot of their fulfillment because they were short-staffed. That pushed me to have to find a third-party fulfillment center. And in that process, I found a great company, and they're growing, but they're still a major player in the third-party fulfillment piece. but my cost is actually lower through them than it would have been if I'd stuck with Amazon. So you go on Amazon and you click and buy the product, and it comes, from that facility, that third-party facility. So it's really smooth, and the customer doesn't even really know that it's not coming from an Amazon warehouse. But now Amazon's opening back up. So if you want one-for-one water, the pricing on the cases on Amazon includes free shipping. So, and because water is heavy, that's part of the factor of the cost. So, but we are competitive with any of the other premium waters that you can buy on Amazon. So that's available on the website. And then we also do, we got hats, like I showed you the hat earlier. And then we have a t-shirt. So we've got like a black cotton t-shirt. And that's the one on the back.
Love it. Yeah, very cool. Good for you. That's all new product then, no?
Yeah. Well, we've had these for a couple of months, but we just launched the store.
Okay.
And then these are great for Florida. This is like an outside sun shirt. It's an SPF 40 sun shirt. When you go on the website and you buy this shirt, it provides clean water for an individual for 1 year.
Okay.
Every one of these items that I just showed you, the hat and the shirts, when you buy it, you provide clean water for an individual for 1 year with that purchase. So everything that we do comes back to the mission and what we do. And I've talked before about how I was really, really intentional about every single piece of this. We're also really, really intentional about the giving that we do. And one for one is our model. But I wanted to make sure that we always had real integrity when it comes to providing what we say we're going to provide. So everything that we do when it comes to funding bucket filters or funding wells, we actually are providing about 4 for 1. So we're providing 4 times as much clean water as we sell. So that was really important to me as well, because I wanted to make sure that we have a tremendous amount of integrity. People are trusting us to be the ones that are the go-between between them and these nonprofits who are doing this. And I want to make sure that we are always worthy of that trust. Yeah.
Well, you've earned my respect.
Oh,
That is awesome. What a real fascinating journey that you've been taking on. And I mean, it's really just getting started again, though, no?
It really is. It really is. And like I said, the retailers kind of did the same thing. When they were in the throes of trying to find toilet paper and hand sanitizer, they really didn't care about putting a new product on the shelves. So things slowed down, but it has also, things are starting to open back up now. And the retailers that we were talking to before are starting to, have those conversations with us again about carrying the product. So it's been really interesting. It's my first global pandemic, so I don't have anything to compare it to.
Yeah, no, we're all, I mean, I said it the other day, we're all on the big ship, but collectively we're still kind of roaming on our own boats, and it's just interesting to see which way people are. You can learn to thrive in this type of chaotic environment, or you spiral down into what's going on, I can't fix. No, just do your inner work, take care of yourself, do what you can in the meantime, and when you're ready to help another person, then you can do that. Right.
I've always, this comes off morbid, but let me get to the point. In the fire service, we saw death almost every day. We did medical rescue calls, we did vehicle accidents, we did structure fires, and in those aspects, primarily the medical rescue calls that we ran, we saw death every day, and it had different effects on different people. But what it did for me was it made me value life that much more. Not one of us is promised our next breath, and it doesn't matter if you're 15 or 85, not one of us knows if we'll be here tomorrow. And it shouldn't scare you, it should challenge you, and it should tell you to live. just live. I mean, anything that you do today, anything that you're good at, there was a time when you had never done it before and you sucked at it. So don't be afraid to suck at something. Don't be afraid to try something you've never done before, and whatever it is, but get out there and live. And when you, I don't know, I was fortunate because that piece of that impacted me personally when I was young, and it changed my outlook. And I lost a really good friend when I was young, and I never got a chance to tell him that he was like a brother to me. And I stood next to his coffin and I promised him, I said, I'll never let that happen again. And tell the people that you care about that you care about them. Live. It's just that simple. I mean, I don't mean to get philosophical here, but stepping out and doing something crazy like starting this business, there's a possibility it will fail. But how can I not try? This is so much bigger than me. How can I not give this everything I've got? How can I not try as hard as I possibly can to make this work? And that's how we should live our lives. I think we should really truly live. I don't know.
No, I completely agree. I mean, it wasn't easy for me to say yes to this. I'm like, you're crazy. There's already, oh my God, hundreds of what seems like thousands of podcasts anymore. How am I going to be successful? I didn't, I wasn't blindsided to, I guess, the failure side of, or even kind of putting those thoughts into my head. I'm like, no, just try it out. And
Right.
so far, so good. But it's still a learning process, and a really interesting journey along the way, just to see more of my skills kind of unfold. Like you're saying, I actually went to college for a communications degree, but never would I think that this is what I'd be utilizing my skills and knowledge with. Not like they really taught you how to promote or build a podcast platform in that schooling, but you still understand how to reach an audience, how to create a message and format it to a way that makes sense or applies to their emotions, just, adding more compassion to a speech or something of that sort. But
Right.
I always believed that I had the capability to do something, again, bigger than myself, and this is what it's turned into for now. So I'm really happy that I said yes, of course, and people along the way that I'm meeting are open to it as well. So
Right.
that's what gives me more confidence in knowing that people are attracted to it. They resonate with it. Because of course, at first I was like, oh no, I'm going to get no views. The first episode, I was like really nervous, but then keep producing. You have to have content that's put out pretty frequently. That way you build the audience, because that's what they expect at that point. So it's been a lot of fun, and I think that was a great closing message for everyone to basically not be afraid. You haven't really mentioned that word a lot, or at all really, but fear of failure, fear of expectations, everything a lot of people have, and it seems like you were just moving forward with this true potential that you saw for it being more than a business. Again, it's
Yeah.
a service that you're doing for more than a village. But yeah, our local community, to hear that other locals are investing in this is just, it's a full circle effect, and
Mm-hmm.
it's promising.
Yeah.
So is there any last message I guess you feel again guided to share or close off with for us?
I don't, the whole reason that I took off on that whole, don't be afraid piece was because of everything that's going on with COVID-19. And there are a lot of people who are isolated and afraid, and those are two terrible things to be. Um, and that's the reason that I wanted to talk about that piece of it, because I've seen, I've seen a lot of that through my years in the fire service, and personally too. So that's the reason that I wanted to share that. And, if if you're watching this and you are home and you're alone and you're isolated and you're afraid and you don't know who or what to believe, because that's the nature of our media today, they're all over the spectrum of whether this is, dangerous or not. Just find somebody to talk to. You've got someone that you can talk to. Find somebody to talk to, and it's okay to not be okay right now. There's a lot going on. It's okay to say I'm not okay right now. I need to talk to somebody. And the person that you just thought of that is the person that you could reach out to, they're going to be glad that you reached out to them. You're not being a burden, but you just thought of somebody that you could reach out to that person.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I preach it a lot on here, but we truly need each other to not only heal and learn from, but to grow from, but to support one another. We've been oddly disconnected through culture, and even to hear that side of like villages are still sustaining with 300 to 500 people. That does not look like that here in America. We might have communal living with the gated communities, but beyond that, it's a very larger scale of the type of community we all live in, but it's never, I guess, too large to still think that you can find someone to relate with. And
Right.
Of course, we have the resources of technology. Always reach out on there to leverage your resource, but I do believe there's someone out there for everyone to connect with, and just share the story, and that feeling of not being alone, of course, and like you just said, saying, not being afraid to say I'm not doing okay. No, I'm not well.
Yeah.
Please help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In the fire service, we saw some really terrible things, and we would do PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder debriefings after those incidents, and a lot of guys would try to act like they were okay, but you could kind of see it, and that was what those incidents were for. The way they were structured, those debriefings were structured to peel those layers off and let you say, that really bothered me to see that. And it's necessary to drag that thing out into the daylight. Takes its power away. So find a way to do that. Don't sit in isolation.
Right. Don't hold it back, just because that's how we become very anxious, and
Yeah.
PTSD becomes more of a global almost crisis at that point, because there's so many people with bottled up emotions and experiences that they haven't shared. And I think, again, it's very practical and useful for people to let that go. It's very therapeutical. It's necessary more than ever than, again, just making a Facebook post or maybe
Right.
journaling it. Like speaking your truth to another person it's powerful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I'm very thankful again that you could take the time for today. I think
Absolutely. This has been great.
it's been really refreshing, and I'm really excited for the viewers to hear this one.
Awesome. Thanks.
Cool. Well, take care, and I wish you the best of continued success, of course, with the growth of One for One.
Great.
And if there's anything I can help with, I'm always here for you.
You as well. You as well.
Take care, John. Have an awesome day.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.